Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story.
How do you find an HOA that thinks it owns you? When the new president next door tried to fine me for using my own road, she thought she had all the power. What she didn't know was that her illegal power trip was about to cost every single homeowner in her neighborhood $800.
I inherited my grandfather's ranch about 5 years ago, and it's been my life ever since. 320 acres of high desert country in New Mexico. Not much to look at if you're used to green pastures, but it's home. We run a small cattle operation, mostly Herefords, and I do some outfitting work for hunters during season. It's a living, if not a lucrative one. The ranch sits at the end of a county road that dead ends at my property line. Well, I say county road, but that's not quite accurate, and that technicality is what this whole story hangs on. The road was originally built by my great-grandfather back in the 1940s when he first homesteaded the property. He needed a way to get his cattle to market, so he carved out a dirt track from his land to connect with what was then the main highway. Over the years, as the area developed, the county started maintaining it, and everyone just assumed it had become a public county road through some kind of prescriptive easement or dedication. I sure as hell thought it was county property. About 7 years ago, a developer bought up a big chunk of land adjacent to my ranch. Within a year, they'd put in a whole subdivision. 40 homes on half-acre lots, all clustered together with their xeriscaped yards and HOA-mandated beige and tan color schemes. The development had its own entrance off the highway, a nice paved road with a stone monument sign that said Desert Vista Estates. Pretentious as hell for what was basically a cookie-cutter suburb plopped down in the middle of scrubland, but whatever, wasn't my business. The thing was, the road I used to access my ranch ran right through what became the edge of their development. The developer had incorporated it into their plans, paved it, put in some landscaping along the sides. They'd needed my permission for some temporary construction access during the build, and I'd agreed because they weren't causing me any real problems. They gave me all the gate codes and keys for the construction barriers they put up, and we had a cordial relationship throughout the process. Once construction was done, the road stayed paved and open, and I figured that was that. I now had a nicer drive to my property, even if it meant passing by rows of stucco houses that all looked identical. For the first couple of years, everything was fine. I'd wave to the residents when I drove past in my truck, sometimes hauling livestock trailers or equipment. They seemed to understand that I was the guy who'd been here first, that the ranch was there long before their subdivision existed. The HOA was run by a retired engineer named Tom who had a reasonable head on his shoulders. We'd even chatted a few times at the gas station in town. He got that we were neighbors and that working together made more sense than creating problems. Then the HOA got a new president. Let's call her Karen because that's exactly the energy she brought to every interaction. I first heard from Karen about 3 months after she took over. I got a letter in the mail on official HOA letterhead informing me that the Desert Vista Estates Board of Directors had voted to implement new traffic management protocols for the community. According to the letter, all vehicles using the roads within the development needed to be registered with the HOA office. There was a form to fill out and a request for copies of my vehicle registrations and proof of insurance. I read the letter twice, trying to figure out if it was a joke. When I called the number listed, I got Karen herself. She had one of those voices that managed to sound both sweet and condescending at the same time, like she was explaining something simple to a child who wasn't quite keeping up. "Oh yes, Mr. Crawford," she said. "This is just a routine safety measure. We need to know who's coming and going through our community." "I'm not coming and going through your community," I explained, keeping my voice level. "I'm driving to my ranch. I've been using this road for years, long before your houses were here." "Well, the road is within the boundaries of Desert Vista Estates now," she said, and I could hear papers shuffling in the background. "And as HOA president, I'm responsible for the safety and security of our residents. I'm sure you understand. It's really just a formality." I didn't fill out the form. I figured it was unenforceable nonsense, and it would blow over. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I got another letter. This one informed me that because I had failed to comply with community registration requirements, I was being assessed a fine of $50. If the fine wasn't paid within 30 days, it would increase to $100, and further action would be taken. Now I was pissed. I drove over to Karen's house, her address was on the letter, and knocked on her door. She answered wearing yoga pants and a tank top, holding a glass of white wine even though it was 3 in the afternoon. "Mr. Crawford," she said, not inviting me in. What can I do for you? You can explain why you think you have any authority to fine me for driving on a public road, I said. It's not a public road, she replied smoothly. It's within the HOA boundaries. The county maintains it, but access control is part of our CC&Rs. Your CC&Rs don't apply to me. I'm not part of your HOA. But you're using our roads. She smiled and it didn't reach her eyes. Look, Mr. Crawford, I understand you're used to doing things a certain way, but we have rules here now and everyone needs to follow them. It's only fair. I wanted to argue more, but I could see it wasn't going anywhere. Instead, I went home and called a lawyer. His name was Bill Hoffman, and he'd handled my grandfather's estate. I figured he'd know something about property law. Send me copies of everything, Bill said after I explained the situation. The letters, the HOA documents if you have them, and any surveys or deeds for your property. I overnighted him a folder of paperwork and he called me back 3 days later. Okay, here's the thing, Bill said. The road is technically within the subdivision plat, but you have a right-of-way easement to use it. That's well established. The HOA can't fine you or restrict your access. I'll send them a letter making that clear. What about their claim that it's not a public road? It's complicated. The county maintains it, which suggests some kind of public access, but the underlying ownership might still be private. Either way, your easement is documented and runs with the land. They can't touch it. Bill sent the letter. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Karen's response came 2 weeks later, addressed to both me and Bill. She claimed that the HOA had consulted with legal counsel and determined that my easement was only valid for agricultural purposes consistent with historical use. Because I occasionally had hunting clients drive up to the ranch, she argued, I was engaged in commercial activity that exceeded the scope of my easement. Therefore, any vehicles associated with my outfitting business would be prohibited from using the road. Can she do that? I asked Bill. No, he said flatly. That's not how easements work. She's grasping at straws, but fighting this could get expensive if she wants to push it. I didn't have the money for a drawn-out legal battle. The ranch barely broke even most years, and I was still paying off some equipment loans. So I tried to compromise. I called Karen and offered to give her a schedule of when my hunting clients would be coming and going, just as a courtesy. Maybe if I threw her a bone, she'd back off. That's a start, she said. But we'll also need to conduct vehicle inspections to ensure compliance with county weight limits on the road. Some of your trucks look pretty heavy. Inspections? Are you serious? The road surface is maintained by HOA dues, Mr. Crawford. We have a right to protect our investment. That's when I realized this wasn't about rules or safety or any of the things Karen kept claiming. This was about control. She wanted me gone. She'd probably imagined buying my ranch eventually, or at least not having to see my dusty trucks and cattle trailers every time she looked out her window. I told her I'd think about it and hung up. Then I called Bill back. She wants to inspect my vehicles now, I said. This is getting insane. Let me do some more digging, Bill said. There might be something we're missing here. What he found changed everything. Bill called me on a Thursday evening and I could hear the excitement in his voice. You're not going to believe this, he said. I pulled the original land patents and survey records from when the county first started maintaining the road. Your great-grandfather never actually deeded that road to the county. He gave them permission to maintain it for public use, but it's still technically a private easement on your family's land. You own it, Crawford. The dirt, the ground, the real estate, it's all part of your ranch property. I sat down trying to process what he was saying. Wait, so it's not a county road? Not technically. The county has permission to maintain it, and you granted an easement for public access, but you own the underlying property and you control the terms. The original agreement your great-grandfather signed gives you the right to regulate access for agricultural purposes, and you can grant or deny access to anyone except county maintenance and emergency vehicles. What about the HOA? They have no special rights to it at all. They're just members of the public using your private road with your permission. Permission you can revoke. I felt something click into place like a tumbler in a lock. What about the paving they did? That's an improvement on your property that they made without a formal agreement. You could actually argue they owe you for it, but that's a separate issue. The point is you have way more control here than anyone realized. Even me, I said, even you. We talked for another hour, going through the implications. I'd have to file some paperwork with the county to formalize the arrangement and make sure everyone understood the actual ownership structure. I'd probably want to grant a formal easement to the county for maintenance purposes just to keep everything clean. But the bottom line was clear. This was my road, and I could decide who used it. I didn't do anything right away. I sat on the information for a few days, thinking through my options. Part of me wanted to just call Karen and tell her to back off, that she had no leverage and never did. But another part of me, the part that had been putting up with her demands and threats for months, wanted something more. That's when she made her biggest mistake. I was coming back from town one afternoon, my truck bed loaded with feed supplies, when I reached the Easement Road and found it blocked by a brand new gate. Not just any gate either. This was a serious piece of work. Heavy steel construction, 8 feet tall with an electronic keypad access system and security cameras mounted on both sides. There was a sign wired to the gate. Private road, Desert Vista Estates, authorized access only. I sat in my truck, staring at it, feeling my blood pressure rise. I tried calling Karen. No answer. I called the HOA office number. Voicemail. I was blocked from my own property on my own road by a gate that probably cost 30 grand. I called the sheriff's department. The deputy who showed up was someone I knew slightly from town. He took one look at the situation and shook his head. "That's a hell of a gate," he said. "Can they do this?" I asked. "Just block the road?" He radioed in to confirm the easement status. When dispatch confirmed it was a private easement on my property rather than a pure county road, he turned back to me with an apologetic expression. "If it's your private property and they built on it without permission, that's trespassing or maybe criminal mischief," he said. "But I can't just cut their gate down without a court order. You'll need to talk to a lawyer and get a judge involved. Sorry, man. This is really more of a civil matter." I called Bill from the side of the road. "They did what?" he said when I explained. "Gated it. I'm sitting here right now looking at it." "That's monumentally stupid on their part," Bill said. "Take photos, document everything. I'll file an emergency motion first thing tomorrow morning. I need to get to my ranch tonight, Bill. I've got cattle to feed." "Is there another way in?" "Yeah, but it means driving 40 minutes around through BLM land, and the road's barely passable. My feed truck won't make it." "Sit tight," Bill said. "Let me make some calls." While I waited, I got out and examined the gate more closely. That's when I remembered something. When the developer had been doing construction, they'd installed temporary gates and given me all the access codes. I still had that paperwork somewhere at home. It was a long shot, but maybe. I drove back to my ranch the long way, bouncing over rocks and through arroyos that made my truck's suspension scream. It took an hour and a half, and by the time I got there, it was almost dark. I dug through my filing cabinet until I found the folder from the construction company. There were 3 different gate codes listed, along with a contact number. The next morning, before Bill could file anything, I drove back to the gate. I tried the first code, nothing. The second code, still nothing. Then I tried some variations, thinking about how security systems often have default master codes. On the 5th try, using a combination of the construction codes I'd been given, the gate beeped and swung open. I guess the security company that installed it had been lazy, or maybe they used standardized systems. Either way, I was in. I drove through, and the gate closed behind me. I went to the ranch, fed my cattle, and sat on my porch thinking. I had access now, but Karen didn't know that. And more importantly, I had leverage I'd been too patient to use. I called Bill. "Don't file the emergency motion yet," I said. "Why not?" "Because I want to do this differently. I want to install my own gate." There was silence on the line. Then Bill laughed. "You're serious?" "Completely. If I own the property, I can install a gate for agricultural purposes, right?" "Well, yes, technically, as long as you provide access to county maintenance and emergency services, and anyone else I want to give access to." "Right, but not the HOA." "Not if you don't want to," Bill said slowly. "But Crawford, this is going to cause a crap storm." "Good," I said. "I'm tired of being nice." It took me 2 days to get everything arranged. I called a fencing contractor I knew, a guy named Miguel who did ranch work all over the county. I explained what I needed. A gate installed on my property, on the ranch side of the Easement Road, before the section that ran through the subdivision. It needed to be serious, lockable, and legal. "You're really doing this?" Miguel asked. "I'm really doing this." "Man, those HOA people are gonna lose their minds." "That's the idea." Miguel and his crew showed up on a Wednesday morning. By noon, there was a heavy-duty ranch gate across the road set in concrete posts with a chain and padlock. I made sure it met all the county requirements, painted with reflective markers wide enough for emergency vehicles with a Knox box for fire department access. Everything by the book. I also put up a sign. Private easement. Crawford Ranch. Access by permission only. Then I sat back and waited. It took about 4 hours. I was in my barn working on a tractor when I heard the sound of a car horn blaring. Then another. Then several more all at once, like an angry symphony. I walked down to the gate and found about a dozen cars backed up on the subdivision side. Karen was in the front vehicle, her face red, leaning on her horn. When she saw me, she jumped out of her car. "What the hell is this?" she screamed. "It's a gate," I said calmly. "For agricultural purposes. I need to keep my cattle from wandering." "You can't do this. This is a road." "It's my road, actually, and my gate. I'll call the sheriff." "Go ahead," I said. "I'll wait." She did call. The same deputy from before showed up, along with his supervisor. They looked at my gate, looked at Karen, and looked at me. "Is this legal?" Karen demanded. The supervisor, a sergeant named Martinez, examined the gate carefully. He checked the Knox box, noted the reflective markers, and pulled out his phone to look something up. "Appears to be," he said finally. "It's on his property, it meets county standards for rural gates, and he's provided emergency access. I don't see a problem." "But we need to use this road. Our houses are right there." "Ma'am, if this is a private easement on his land, he's within his rights to control access," Martinez said. "You'll need to work it out with him or talk to a lawyer." Karen turned to me, and I could see her trying to control her rage. "You can't keep us prisoner in our own homes," she hissed. "You have another entrance off the highway," I pointed out. "Your main gate that you're all so proud of. Use that. That adds 20 minutes to everyone's commute." "Should have thought of that before you put a gate across my road," I said. I went back to my ranch, and that evening I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was the HOA's lawyer, a guy who introduced himself as Robert Chen. "Mr. Crawford, I think we need to talk about this situation," he said. He sounded tired. "I'm listening." "My clients may have acted hastily in installing their gate, but your response is causing significant disruption to an entire community of homeowners." "Your clients installed a gate on my property without permission," I said. "They've been harassing me for months, threatening fines, making up rules. I'm done being accommodating." "I understand you're frustrated, but..." "No, I don't think you do understand. That road? I own it. Not an easement, not a right-of-way. I own the actual dirt. My great-grandfather built it, and my family never deeded it to anyone. You can check the county records." There was a long pause. "I'll need to verify that," Chen said. "You do that. In the meantime, my gate stays." He called back the next day. "You're right about the ownership," he said, and now he sounded even more tired. "I've advised my clients that they need to remove their gate immediately and negotiate with you in good faith." "That's a start," I said. "What would it take for you to grant them access?" "Well, first, they need to remove their gate. Today. I want it gone by sunset. Second, I want a formal apology from the HOA board, in writing. Third, I want all those bogus fines and demands rescinded. And fourth, I never want to hear from Karen again. That seems... I'm not done. Fifth, the HOA is going to pay my legal fees, every penny. And sixth, they're going to sign a formal easement agreement recognizing my ownership and my right to access without any interference forever." Chen was quiet for a moment. "I'll present this to the board." "You do that. And Chen, until I get what I want, that gate stays locked. Everyone can drive the long way around." The next 2 weeks were chaos in Desert Vista Estates. I heard about it through friends in town who knew some of the residents. The extra 20 minutes each way was adding up. People were late to work, missing appointments, complaining endlessly. The Facebook group for the subdivision was apparently a dumpster fire of anger and finger-pointing. Karen tried to rally the residents against me, painting me as some kind of rural tyrant, but too many people looked into what had actually happened and realized she'd caused the whole mess. There was a petition to recall her from the board. Emergency meetings were called. Meanwhile, I kept using the code I'd figured out to open their gate, coming and going as I pleased. They didn't know I had access, which meant they thought I was driving the long way around every time. I made a point of mentioning how inconvenient it was whenever anyone asked, really twisted the knife. About 10 days after I installed my gate, I got a call from a different board member, a guy named James Peterson. "Mr. Crawford, I'm the new HOA president," he said. "Karen has resigned. I was wondering if we could meet and talk about this situation." We met at a coffee shop in town, neutral territory. He showed up in business casual, carrying a leather folder. When he sat down, he immediately started with an apology. Look, on behalf of the board, I want to say we're sorry. Karen went rogue on a lot of this. We had no idea she was sending you those letters or planning to install that gate. When we found out about the cost, he shook his head. $32,000 plus the legal fees. It's a disaster. I tried to tell her she didn't have any authority over me. I said, I know, I've read all the correspondence now. She had this idea that she could force you to sell or something. It was never realistic. He slid some papers across the table. This is a formal apology from the board, and documentation rescinding all fines and demands. We've removed their gate as of this morning. You can verify that if you want, and we're prepared to pay your legal fees. My understanding is that's about $5,000 so far. $5,200, I said. Bill's still tallying. Fine, we'll pay it. Now, about access. We talked for over an hour. In the end, we worked out an agreement. I would grant a permanent easement to the residents of Desert Vista Estates for access through the road, with the explicit understanding that I owned it and maintained final authority. The HOA would pay for an automatic gate system that I controlled with a keypad that I could reprogram whenever I wanted. They'd also pay for annual road maintenance, grading, gravel, whatever was needed. In exchange, I'd give them access codes and be reasonable about things. If I needed to close the road for cattle movement or ranch work, I'd give 24 hours notice when possible. What about Karen? I asked. She's selling her house, James said. Or trying to. Market's tough right now, especially after all this drama, but she won't be a problem anymore. Bill drew up the formal agreement, and the HOA board voted to approve it unanimously. I signed it at the county recorder's office, making it official. The road was mine, the access was controlled, and I'd gotten everything I'd asked for. The new gate went in a month later. Nice system, much better than the one Karen had installed. Miguel did the work again, and this time the HOA paid his bill without complaint. I still see some of the Desert Vista residents from time to time. Most of them are friendly enough now, maybe a little embarrassed about the whole thing. A few even stop by the ranch occasionally to buy beef or ask about hunting access. We coexist. Karen never did sell her house at the price she wanted. I heard she finally accepted an offer about $30,000 below market value and moved to Arizona. Some of the neighbors told me she tried to rally people to her side right up until the end, insisting she'd been right all along, that I was the problem, but nobody was listening anymore. The funny part, the thing that really made it all worthwhile? About 6 months after everything settled down, James mentioned to me that the HOA's insurance company had gotten involved. Apparently, Karen's actions, installing the gate without proper authority, the harassment campaign, all of it, had violated about a dozen provisions of their policy. The insurance company refused to cover the costs, which meant it all came out of the HOA's reserve fund. We had to levy a special assessment on all the homeowners, James said ruefully. $800 each to cover the Karen disaster. I couldn't help but smile. Every single resident of Desert Vista Estates had paid for Karen's little power trip. That seemed like justice to me. I still drive past those identical stucco houses every time I go to town. The road is smooth and well maintained, better than it ever was before. My gate sits at the entrance to my property, a reminder that I was here first and I'm not going anywhere. And you know what? I did end up complying with one of Karen's demands. Remember how she wanted me to secure proper authorization for road access and display appropriate identification? Well, I had Bill draft an official authorization letter, authorizing myself, as the property owner, to use my own easement. I got it laminated and hung it from my rearview mirror. Every time I punch in the gate code, I glance at that ridiculous letter and laugh. I made sure to mail Karen a copy before she moved, along with a note thanking her for the reminder about proper procedures. I never heard back, but I like to think she got it. The ranch is quieter now. The cattle don't care about property law or HOA drama. They just need water and grass and someone to check on them every day. That's what I do, same as my grandfather did, and his father before him. Karen wanted control. She wanted rules and order and compliance. What she got was a very expensive lesson about reading property records before you start throwing your weight around. And me? I got exactly what I always had. My land, my road, and my peace and quiet. Turns out that's all I ever wanted in the first place. The next one is a malicious compliance story. This happened a while ago with an online retailer. I ordered something for $96. Free shipping kicked in at $100, and shipping was about $12. And yes, this part was 100% my fault. It was written right there on the site. I just did not notice until basically the second after I placed the order. So I opened the support chat and asked if they could add something cheap to the order. I did not really care what it was, a cable, batteries, whatever. I just thought spending another $5 made more sense than paying $12 for shipping. They said they could not modify an order once it was placed. Fair enough. I asked if they could cancel it so I could just place the order again. Nope. Apparently it was already processing. Then I asked if they could remove the shipping charge somehow. Also no. The support guy was not rude or anything, by the way. He was actually pretty nice. He just kept saying the system would not let him do any of it. Then he told me I could return the order when it arrived and place a new one. So I asked, returns are free, right? Yep. And if I reorder over $100, shipping is free? Yep. I actually thought I was misunderstanding him, so I asked again. So you are going to ship this to me, pay for me to ship it back, then ship the same thing to me again because you cannot add a $5 item to the order? Pretty much. He said that was the only option he could offer. So, okay. The package showed up a few days later. I did not even open the actual item, I just put the return label on it and sent it back. Then I ordered the exact same thing again and added a $6 pack of USB cables. Free shipping. In the end, I got the same thing I wanted in the first place, plus cables, and still paid less than I would have if I had just kept the original order. Meanwhile, they paid to ship the first package to me, paid for the return, processed the return, and then shipped the second order. I know this probably makes me sound a bit petty, maybe even selfish, especially because the original mistake was mine. Honestly, if they had just said, sorry you missed the threshold, there is nothing we can do, I probably would have just eaten the $12. But they specifically told me the solution was to return it and reorder, so I did. I am not really mad at the support guy either. He was just following whatever system they gave him. I guess I was too. Clarification. Due to backlash about me paying the initial shipping cost, they also issued a refund for that. That is the illogical part of this policy. I would not have cared about all of this if they had not done that, but why lose money when you could simply agree to cancel my order? Also, about the environmental side of it, I think individual actions like this can teach companies to fix their policies, which could prevent more waste of energy, time, and money in the future. So I would not mind. The next one is an entitled people story. Unfortunately, I live in a 55-plus older community as a caretaker for my father. I'm not that young anymore, but most can look and tell I'm not that old either, which is good, I guess. We had much more issues in the beginning, and the HOA gave us hell at every chance they got. For a bit of background, the owner of the property is like a grandma to me. She has never lived in this unit, so I guess the people here don't like the fact that they weren't informed about us prior to moving in. We've lived here for about 2 years now, but they have not been easy. Thankfully, I left in January 2025 and only came back about 8 months ago, so I haven't been here throughout the entire time myself. Within the first few weeks, I was accosted multiple times in the corridors as I would enter or exit the property. This was done by a power-hungry member of the HOA board who has seemingly gone out of his way to make my life a living hell throughout my time staying here. It was hard at first, but after a while, my grandmother started to take up for us as she realized we were constantly being harassed without having caused any trouble. We still deal with the occasional BS here and there, but I just choose not to interact with any of the board members whenever I see them out. I've always kept it respectful on my end because I'm not looking to duck this up for my dad. Now, as far as the residents go, these ducking people are the most rude and entitled people on the ducking planet, and it's insane. It makes me want to just blow the entire ducking building up sometimes. I walk past people in the hallways and wave, say hello, but they just look at me like I'm an alien. A lot of them give you dirty looks, and some of them even size you up. One lady did it to my wife, and I was so disgusted by it that I won't even look in any of our neighbors' directions anymore. Just sick and tired of the constant and utter disrespect. Add to that the fact that we don't live in the best area, so naturally any tangible financial opportunities that can be lucrative are slim to none. Half the tenants are French-Canadian snowbirds, so the majority of the building remains vacant 10 months out the year, which is pretty nice. The problem is that the permanent residents constantly beef with each other like overgrown teenagers. I swear to God, half the time it genuinely feels like I'm living inside of a real-world house. They've tried many times to pick issues with me, but I'm too young to care, and I honestly have my plate full of my own crap. I try not to be disrespectful or dismissive, but I also go the other way when I see any of them walking towards me. My grandmother owns the place, and I really do not need to hear about any more calls that she may have gotten from other residents or members of the board. It sucks, especially because every single day I try to remain humble. I know my crap stinks, but I just really wish someone would give them a news flash. The ducking sun doesn't rise or set in the crescent arch of anyone's ass cheeks. Maybe if we all respected each other a bit more, the morale and quality of life would be much better. I've always had faith in humanity, but that respect your elders bullcrap is out of the window for me. The next one is an entitled parent story. When I was younger, I worked at a daycare. I was in charge of the preschool-age kids for the afternoon. There was one girl there I will call Katie, who was the sweetest kid. She didn't bully, shared toys, and played well with the others. She was a favorite at the daycare. One day I come in and I notice Katie is not as active as she usually is, so I go talk to her. She said that her neck was hurting. I noticed, though, that her cheeks were red and then asked her to show me where her neck hurts. She pointed to the front and I realized that she was talking about her throat. I took her to another room without kids and took her temperature. It was 101. After that, the director got involved. Paperwork needed to be filled out and her parents needed to come get her, and I was asked to stay with her until they came. We asked her how long she had been feeling this way and said a few days, but Mommy and Daddy were giving her medicine that made her feel better for a little while. I realized then that they knew she was sick but brought her to daycare anyway. The director comes back after a few mins and tells me that she called the parents and someone would pick her up. They took over 2 hours to do so. During that time, Katie felt worse and worse and was crying off and on and just wanted to go home. I stayed with her the entire time and tried to comfort her, but she needed a doctor and/or medicine, and the daycare was not authorized to give her any. When her dad gets there, he gave the director an attitude and asked why we didn't give her some Tylenol to bring down the fever. My director told him that we are not authorized to give over-the-counter medication to the kids, not even cough drops, and per the center's guidelines, no child can be dropped off while they are sick. If any medication of any kind needs to be administered, we have to have a doctor's note. She then emphasized that Katie cannot return until she had a regular temperature for at least 2 days. He got pissed and started the "what am I supposed to do" argument. She just told him that was not our problem, and he and his wife had just exposed the entire daycare to her illness and held her ground. Well, what do you know, the very next morning I woke up with a severe sore throat. I thought that I had probably caught Katie's sickness, so I called my boss. She said that she thought this might happen because the morning person in Katie's class had called in that morning sick, and she was also 6 months pregnant. Over the next couple of days, 3 other kids were out sick, all in close age to Katie, and had played with her. I was so miserable I went to the doctor, diagnosis strep throat. It took me 3 days of misery to kick it, and 5 days for my pregnant coworker. By the time I came back, all of the kids were fine, but they were all talking about how much they hated being sick and how happy they were to be better. A part of me wanted to yell at Katie's parents that their selfishness caused multiple people, including kids, to miss school and work and be miserable, but I said nothing since I never wanted Katie to feel bad because of her parents' actions. Unfortunately, this was not the only time parents brought a sick kid to daycare, just the worst one. I get that people need to work, and not every job is okay with taking time off the last minute, but shouldn't you put the welfare of your kid first? She was absolutely miserable, and their lives were more important than that. Her dad showed that with his attitude. I left that job soon after because of multiple parents' attitudes, and the job just overall made me want a hysterectomy at 18. Anyone else with an entitled parent story, feel free to share. Anyway, thank you for watching.